the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the
Welcome to today's meeting of the Fire Committee. On our agenda today is a discussion on fire safety in social housing. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that on Saturday, the 14th of June, we marked the 9th anniversary of the Grenfell Tower fire, in which 72 people lost their lives. We remember those who lived in the building and those who lost precious loved ones, and we remember the bravery of the men and women of the London Fire Brigade and the other emergency services who attended the fire. This committee continues to stand with the Grenfell community, and we hope that through our work, we can play our part in helping to ensure that such a tragedy cannot happen again. We now have a few small items of business before we move on to the main part of the meeting. Can I ask our clerk, Diane Richards, to confirm any apologies for today's meeting?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for absence have been received today from Assemblymember Hall and also from Assemblymember Cooper, for whom Assemblymember Baker is substituting today.
Thank you. We now move on to the declarations of interest. Can we note the list of offices held by Assembly members? And can I also ask members if they have any disclosable pecuniary interest in specific items listed on the agenda? No? Okay. Can we note the membership and chairing arrangements, the terms of reference, and the standing delegations of authority for the committee as agreed by the London Assembly in its annual meeting on the 11th of May, 2026? Can we confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of March, 2026? Yes, agreed, confirm, okay. Can we note the completed, closed, and outstanding actions arising from previous meetings of this committee? Can we note the action taken by me as chair under delegated authority in consultation with party group lead members, namely to agree the committee's response to the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Committee call for evidence, wildfire risk and response? And can we note the following responses to our investigation? The responses from the National Fire Chiefs Council and the London Fire Brigade to the committee's report, Exposure to Fire Contaminants in London, a Hidden and Growing Risk, and the response from the London Fire Brigade to the committee's letter regarding the well-being of London's firefighters. And can we now move on? We now move on to our main item, a discussion on fire safety and social housing. Can I welcome our first panel of guests? We have Pamela Newman. She's Vice Chair of G15 Residents Group, and Adam Gabsy, Co-Chair of Inclusion London. I will start with the first question, and then I'll hand over to my colleagues for subsequent questions. We have you both for about 40 minutes, and I'm really glad you're both here with us this morning, covering such an important topic. All of the questions in this section are to you both, and I think it's important that you feel that you're not obligated to each answer, but you certainly are very welcome to, and we're welcome to reflect on each other's answers and add things, and that sort of submission would be really, really helpful to us. We're here to listen to you as you have lived experience, and that's very important to us. So to you both, what are the main fire safety risks and or defects you have seen currently affecting residents in social housing?
I think that's both an easy and a hard question. So for residents are mainly concerned about their buildings and what does safe look like for them. And I think something that's been really interesting following the outcome of Grenfell and the introduction of all the regulations are that residents are learning about much more the risks in their homes and are much more interested in it. But I think there's something about a kind of confidence and trust there. So, landlords are coming and they're talking in technical speak to us, the residents, and it's sometimes really technical and we don't understand, but we want to understand. And I think when I was speaking to the residents of the G15 Residents Group and asking the questions that you'd put forward, one of the kind of sound bites that they gave me was that residents don't make decisions based on fire strategy documents. They make decisions based on whether they trust their building is safe. And I thought that was quite a really positive soundbite to mention here, because I think it just shows, doesn't it, that actually people want the information, they want to feel safe, but they don't want it to be over technical. And I think there's kind of a long way to go around that.
Thank you for inviting me. I'd like to start by saying that I think one of the main issues is accessible formats. So the failure to understand that disabled people are not a homogenous group, that we're not a one-size-fits-all, and fire safety kind of needs to reflect that. And at the moment, that is not the case. Even with regard to fire alarms themselves, a deaf person would not be able to hear an alarm as it is. So at Inclusion London, we have held a report with regard to accessible housing called Barriers at Home. In the report, we interviewed 70 plus people. 10 of those reported that they failed to have a flashing fire alarm. And when they take out hearing aids, they would fail to hear the fire alarm. So the fact that things are not adapted at all to the person's needs, which is what was recommended by the Grenfell inquiry, by the way, phase 1, and the failure to identify a disabled person and adapt the information, the technology, everything, accessible formats are key. So when the London Fire Brigade or housing associations do deal with tenants, some of which, myself included, require large print, that is not given as a standard, and it should be. You know, in the 9 years following Grenfell, which was 9 years following Lakanal House, I mean, these lessons should have been learned. Yeah, and we're still talking about accessible formats. I'm quite disappointed in, can I say the London Fire Brigade? No, it's not just the London Fire Brigade, it's the London Assembly, it's everyone. The failure to understand there are 1.6 million disabled Londoners. And by disabled, we're not just talking about wheelchair users, we're talking about people with mental health conditions, people that are neurodiverse, people, there are a wide range, blind or partially sighted, deaf or hard of hearing, people with visible and invisible impairments. And the failure to adapt communication leads to people being at risk if a fire was to occur. So it's not as simple as I often refer to my wheelchair as a blessing because people can look and see that I'm disabled, right? If I have an invisible impairment, the barriers are somewhat endless. Even a deaf person that should be known by their housing association or the housing provider, whether that be private tenant or social housing, the failure to identify the disabled person is an issue and communicate with that person and provide accessible formats, accessible fire alarms. Yeah, I will stop there. I can continue.
No, but you both raised really, really good points. And on just on, I mean, I know we did give you the questions, but just on 10 of the of those 70 people, are those 70 people all in social housing, and the 10 have the flashing alarms?
Yes, they are. The report is online. If you go to the Inclusion London website and type barriers at home, we have interviewed many people. But please do not disregard the 21% of disabled people that live in private rented. Yeah, because we're forced to, because, you know, the housing stock is quite historical and the building of social housing going forward is limited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I know. I mean, and some of us are councillors as well, and we know that how many people end up in the private rented sector, even though normally you would expect that they would be in social housing just because of the stock of social housing is not there. I really liked what you said, Pamela, about how when, you know, residents don't look at fire reports and fire regulations, it's how they feel about their building and how they feel, you know, if their building is safe or if it's not safe, and that's how they respond, rather than reading kind of 14.2 of some very long document. I do wonder, do you think residents are feeling empowered to raise concerns about their own safety?
Yeah, I don't think there's, so from all the conversations I had before coming today, there wasn't anyone that actually said that they don't feel empowered to have the conversations. I think it's about feeling like they're part of the solutions and being involved. So a lot of things are implemented and then they're just there. Or you might be lucky and you might get a bit of consultation prior to them being implemented. But actually what we want to do is see residents part of shaping future fire safety strategies, so that actually when you make a decision to implement something, it's right from the very start because it's got that lived experience perspective. And I think that's the bit that's missing at the moment. And I think there are loads of opportunities to do that. I think we've seen some really positive stuff come out of this, like a lot of buildings that are a lot safer and people know more about how their building should be and, you know, how they can contact the landlord or the fire brigade or whoever. But actually, are they involved in developing the future strategy? No, not yet.
And where I would agree, I would somewhat disagree. Disabled people are, in many cases, fearful of raising complaints to the landlord because they're seen as a problem. If you live in a shared tenure accommodation like mine, where there are leaseholders and social housing tenants, if under the new regulations, now I know we're going to get to that, but under the new regulations, if something is deemed proportionate and the cost should be bared by the leaseholder, which then makes the disabled person fearful of raising a complaint. Now, I personally think that they're getting what they deserve, right? Safety is a human right, in my opinion, but the cost is borne by other tenants, and therefore the disabled person then becomes fearful to even raise a complaint, which it can be difficult for the disabled person.
Yeah, absolutely. Do either of you feel height is a factor, the height of buildings, and in the way people either experience risk or feel about the safety of their building?
I can speak from personal experience because I live in a high-rise building that is affected by cladding and remedial works that have been discussions have been going on for the last 6 years. And whilst I appreciate that the end result is that the building will be safer than it was, it feels like we are just trapped. I'm a shared owner, live in a mixed tenure building, but actually because of the regulations, I can't staircase, sell, do anything. Thankfully, I don't want to. I love the flat that I live in, I love the shared ownership product as well, because I'd have never been able to buy in London if it wasn't for that. But there's definitely something about living in a taller building. I know that my neighbours feel quite scared when anything happens, actually. We had at one point some fire on the roof, basically, and everybody was it was a minor fire, it wasn't anything big, but everybody was absolutely petrified because they were just told that they were in this building that was a high-rise building, high risk, needed all this remediation, didn't really know what that remediation was and all the fire stopping that wasn't there. So people were just worried about this terminology that they'd been given. And I would say that hasn't really, the communication by the landlord has got much, much better. But I would say that people's fears are not alleviated because they still don't understand, that if a building needs fire stopping, does that mean the fire's not going to stop when that one happens? So I think there's a long way to go. And yes, I think people living in, just because they're high rise and they're called high risk, and they're classed as that, I think it puts the fear of God into people.
Adam.
We live in a city, a beautiful city, where there's a lot of historical housing stock. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If a regular rebuttal I get to being a disabled person that lives on the 6th floor of a high-rise building is that all disabled people should be housed on the ground floor. That is unrealistic, because if you were to walk down any road in this city, you would find a step to get in the house, which is a barrier in the first place. Then when you get inside, people are not able to access the bathroom, not able to access, sleeping arrangements. So there is an issue with even ground floor properties, yeah? And the historical housing stock. Smoke doesn't discriminate based on height, right? So if smoke was to rise to the 7th floor, it's not going to stop, right? And likewise, a fire doesn't discriminate based on where you are. If someone is disabled on the ground floor, the 1st floor, the 2nd floor, they're still disabled. So someone might need assistance with evacuating regardless of height. So Inclusion London look at height as an arbitrary figure. Mm-hmm. It's just been kind of pulled out of the air, kind of. Yeah, it just doesn't make sense to me personally.
That's really helpful.
Can I just add to that? I was going to say, when I spoke to members, one of the key messages that came back was that residents don't really understand a stay-put policy or an evacuation policy, and that confidence in building safety is often influenced by kind of previous incidents and media coverage. And so there needs to be a lot more information around what that means for individual people in buildings, and we're not sure that that's coming through loud enough. People want they want to feel that basically fire evacuation is about behaviour, isn't it? And making sure people get out or do what they're supposed to do in an emergency. And I think that came through as one of the key messages, that people don't really understand what that is. And somebody mentioned that, in a workplace, you would have a fire evacuation, you would have a planned, drill, and people would feel more confident after they'd done that because they would know what to do. And perhaps there is something about thinking whether something like that could be included in the future for people in blocks that are high risk.
That's really helpful. I lectured my colleagues about sticking to time today because we were with you for such a short time. So I don't want to be hypocritical. I'm going to hand over to Assemblymember Tyrrell for the next line of questions.
Thank you, Chair. Before I ask my I've just got a couple of questions about the aftermath of Grenfell for you, but which is, firstly, have any of the changes since Grenfell either failed to make a positive impact or had a negative impact, in your opinion?
I would say a bit of both, really. Like I said earlier, it's good that now people are aware of the risks that are around and what organisations, landlords and the fire brigade need to do to support people to be safe. And I think people's knowledge has increased. But I would say there are some really simple things that have impacted residents. So from the conversations that I've had, and we keep having, lots of people have felt that, 3 monthly fire door inspections when people are at work most of the day or not in their property from 9 till 5 is a real pain, and people can't understand why it needs to be so frequent, and, it disrupts their day. Obviously, they know that their door needs to be fire safe, but it feels like it's almost an overburden, and some of those costs are then passed on to people as well. So there's something about making sure that, again, it's communication. I would say everything is about communication. If things are communicated well, people don't mind being disrupted, and people see the positives and understand why these things are happening. But when it's not communicated well, it can seem really disruptive and pointless, and something that is not really helpful at all.
As someone who is on the Fire Brigade Community Forum, I have heard often from the LFB that they are making attempts to steady concerns and to steady people's fears. So I do commend them for that. There are serious gaps in the way they're behaving and the way they're acting and the speed of things, right? So we are here 9 years after Grenfell, and disabled people are still fighting for safety. It's kind of, funny, but not funny, really not funny at the same time, because one of the clearest recommendations from phase 1 of the Grenfell inquiry was personal emergency evacuation plans, and we feel that it's been watered down massively with the RPEEPS legislation. So, okay, things have slightly moved in a positive direction with regard to new legislations, but there are huge gaps, which I'm sure we will get to when we talk about RPEEPS.
Thank you. You've touched upon this a bit, Alan, but are there any changes that ought to have been made that weren't, in your opinion?
Yeah, communication. Providing communication in accessible formats should not be very difficult for the LFB to do, and engagement and using kind of consent as a barrier rather than the positive thing that consent should be. Yeah, the LFB should be come to disabled people and asking for consent, but if they fail to provide the accessible formats, the information in an accessible format, the resident, the tenant, is then deemed as failing to reply or failing to consent. But if they can't understand it, then how can they consent to something that they can't understand? And I feel the London Fire Brigade should understand that. That's a very easy change that should have been made.
And I'd just add to that and say the speed of response, really, and the accountability. So I think residents need kind of confidence that when stuff is reported, it's going to be acted on quickly. I'd say the remediation stuff is another kind of good example of that. This is taking far too long. And whilst I appreciate that, most organisations now have a plan to get stuff done by 2030 or 2029, it's not soon enough, really. It really is not. People are feeling unsafe for years and years and years, and that's just not good enough.
Sorry, I just want to respond to that. My housing association did remediate my building, but absolutely failed to correspond with me. So I'm a disabled person that relies on the care system, right? Which is underfunded, stretched, and that's a totally different conversation. But their failure to communicate with me then led to my carers feeling away about the noise that was created, and the timing of the works, sometime it was during the night. I live in a high-rise that is next to an underground station, and therefore working during office hours was not accessible for them. So they worked during the night, but they failed to correspond with me as a disabled person, which I really would have appreciated, you know, when drilling starts at 3 in the morning. You know, it's bad for everyone, but for, you know, it's not great for me because it exacerbates all of my health conditions, yeah? Yeah.
Thank you for those answers. Are social housing residents' concerns about fire safety being listened to and acted upon in a timely fashion, in your views?
I think I just probably answered that question. So when I was talking to members, they were kind of quite pragmatic about it all, really. So, you know, we don't expect immediate solutions, but we do expect the progress to be visible, and we expect honest communication about what's going on. If things can't progress as quickly as they need to, then tell us, talk to us about it, why, you know, and give us some understanding of what the next steps are. I think residents have said that they want to be able to see evidence that issues have led to action, and when that happens it builds trust, and I think that's the biggest area that needs to be worked upon, really, isn't it? Trust for everybody.
Do you mind asking the question again so I can respond to you rather than reiterating what Pamela said?
Yeah, absolutely. The question: are social housing residents' concerns about fire safety being listened to and acted upon in a timely fashion?
The short answer to your question is no. Timely is no, that is not the case. And the failure to communicate is a massive issue. So not only are things not being done fast enough, we're here 9 years after Grenfell still asking questions. But, you know, the failure to communicate, the failure to identify disabled residents and communicate with them in formats they would understand is somewhat disappointing. Maybe disappointing is not a strong enough word, right? But it is, and Grenfell, again, I'd say was years after Lakanal House, which was in 2009. So there were warnings. And you know, I worry, what are we waiting for? My building, me to burn? Right? What are we waiting for here? So there seems to be the arbitrary height, which doesn't make sense. The cost, which is, you know, a landlord can put a value on my tenancy, but what is the value of my life, right? It's just, okay, thank you.
Thank you for both those answers. One thing that's just come out of your answer, my background before coming to the Assembly was I worked in financial services where there's set limits when a complaint comes in about how long you have to respond to something. And in every communication, you have to send information about how to escalate it to the Ombudsman if you're not happy with the thing. Do you think tenants have enough knowledge on it, it's promoted enough, because you both said that you're not happy with the response times and action? Do you think there's enough awareness around the housing ombudsman and particularly in the social market? And do you think there's more we can do in the private around that, particularly with fire safety and improving that?
It's an interesting question, because I think probably people think about the housing I think people are aware of the housing ombudsman for sure, and a lot more aware than they used to be. And I work in housing too, so I have that kind of housing background knowledge. But I wouldn't say that I see or think that there are many complaints about fire safety through the Ombudsman. I would say most of them are generic complaints with the landlord. So I think that would be an excellent area to focus in on and make people aware that they can use that for that reason.
The easy answer to your question again is no. I'm very FCBC, right? So I'm for the community, by the community. Now, there is a large group of Londoners that are not heard, not listened to, and totally disregarded with regard to legislation and political language. And even the word ombudsman is not totally understood within the community, which is a huge problem, because I'm greatly involved in the disability rights movement, right? And within the movement, people do understand that their rights need to be heard and need to be gained. So there is an understanding of ombudsman. If I take myself out of the disability rights movement and I put myself in any high-rise and talk to Londoners, as the London Assembly should be doing, people have no idea what an ombudsman even is, let alone getting their voice heard. Yeah, there are a lot of Londoners that feel unheard. Yeah, and I'm trying to amplify their voices because all I hear is complaints. Honestly, all I hear is complaints. The people that roam around London wearing a hood, a tracksuit, they feel unheard. Yeah, and this is, you know, a great part of the community. Yeah, when I was on the Grenfell Silent Walk, and I look around, I can see people that are on their balconies and they're just totally unheard. Yeah, and they're just looking at what we're doing, but elevating their complaints and elevating their voice is not something that comes easy to everyone. Yeah, and hence why I'm here, because I was given an opportunity, and then who am I not to seize that opportunity? I speak for people that do feel unheard. And again, I will stop, but I can carry on.
Thank you so much for that. I'm going to go to Assemblymember Polanski now.
Thanks, Chair. Pamela, if I can start with you. You said that, you said a couple of times, everything is communication, and you gave the example, for instance, of fire stops and then people worrying that the fire is not going. The question I've got is how well are social housing residents being communicated with in terms of fire risks? But from everything you and Adam have said, clearly the answer is not as well as it could be. Do you have an idea what needs to improve or change?
Yeah, I can give you some real life experience from that one. So where I live in my block, obviously we've talked about the remediation works and everything else. So at the start of this process, we had no idea what it all meant. We had no idea how safe or unsafe the building was from the information that we've been given by our landlords. And we're quite a vocal group of residents. So we didn't shut up and we kept on communicating and asking for more information until eventually the landlord put in place quarterly meetings with us. And they were online and they were in the evening, which was great. In those meetings, it felt like we were just being presented at with no opportunity for questions. And over the last 3 years, I would say that those meetings have evolved massively. So now, when we've given them feedback, we've said we need at least half the meeting for questions, half the meeting for whatever you want to tell us. And that's worked really, really well. But I also think there are still opportunities for them to communicate better. So recently I was involved in just an off-the-cuff discussion with somebody within the landlord's organisation, because I'm the chair of the customer council there, and I found out that my building had a building safety officer who was supposed to communicate with the residents there and make them feel a bit safer and talk and have those ad hoc conversations that we're not getting at the moment. And they've been in place for 6 months, but I've never seen them. None of my neighbours knew about them. So what were they doing? Where were they? What was the point? So I went back and communicated that with my landlord, and they are working on how to make sure that those people are more visible at the moment. So in short, yes, things are changing for the better, but there is still a lot more to do, as I've said, with communication.
Really helpful, thank you. And Adam, my question was going to be, are people being communicated with? But I suspect you'll say the short answer is no. If you're in charge, let's put you in charge, Adam. If someone moves in, what would good engagement look like? Like, what's best practice?
At this point, I feel like an evacuation plan, a personal emergency evacuation plan, should be as standard as your housing, when you sign your housing
contract.
Yeah. It should be a standard. You should come with that. I mean, if you're a day late with your rent, your housing association will ring you and ask where their pounds are, but then they fail to provide equitable, equal evacuation processes for disabled people. And failure to even communicate is a massive problem, as we've said over and over and over. Thank you.
And Adam, do you have any examples of where it has been done well? Have you seen any examples where you think actually that landlord or that social housing provider is communicating in an effective way?
No.
Okay.
No.
And that tells the story, I think. And then finally, you've mentioned the ombudsman. That's a word that not lots of people know. We've also been talking about remediation. What job do you think there is to kind of do an education exercise or change the wording that social housing providers use?
I do think that there is a great opportunity for the LFP to engage with the community now. I am currently living in Harrow. I give my time to a local DDPO, Deaf and Disabled People's Organisation, called Harrow Association of Disabled People. At HAD, we have liaised and worked with Simon Horn, who is the Borough Commander for the London Fire Brigade in Harrow. His team have come to HAD and worked with the community, spoken to the community, and that is good engagement. Yeah, talking to disabled people and outreach is good engagement. Last time they visited my building again, they spoke to residents and they spoke to the community, which is good. It's a very good example of how to deal with people, is how Simon Horn and his team have been dealing with people in Harrow. So I think that's a great example of how it should be rolled out London-wide.
Thank you, and thank you both so much for all you're doing to advocate for so many people. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, and thank you for your very clear example of Harrow. But it's points like that that really do help us, help inform the way in which we work when we have what it looks like to residents. That's very helpful. I'm going to hand over to Assemblymember Baker.
Thanks, Chair. And we're coming to PEEPs now. First to Adam and then Pamela. What is your assessment of the new, as of 1st of April 2026, personal emergency evacuation plans? As we know, PEEPs, for anyone who's watching and doesn't know, regulations for social housing residents.
I think there are huge gaps in the legislation. I mean, like, even the inconsistency of a lot of people co-parent in this great city, and if a disabled child was to stay with one parent for 4 days and the other parent for 3 days, the RPEEP only applies to the primary residence. It does make sense to me, as if a fire only would happen in the primary residence. No, the child is disabled regardless of where they are. So there are huge gaps. To make it slightly personal, in 2022, both lifts in my building were not working for 64 days, which meant I was trapped on the 6th floor. In 2023, again, both lifts didn't work for 42 days. We then forced, through communication, but I would say forced the Housing Association to change both lifts, one of which are fire safe, which is essentially my PEEP. But if the lifts are not working, it's not a PEEP, right? You're just a disabled person in a high-rise, again, not being able to escape. This year, it's been 7 days, yeah, which seems to have coincided with the hottest days of the year. And again, disabled people, numerous. There are accessible apartments where I live. Disabled people are trapped. So there are glaring gaps in this new legislation. You know, the failure for the London Fire Brigade to enforce, to me, is a big problem. Yeah, so landlords are kind of. I was given a talk. Sorry to go off on a tangent. I was given a talk yesterday in Richmond. Yeah, and I was talking to a local housing association there, and they were referring to tenants as customers, which really makes me sick. They're like a non-for-profit organization referring to their tenants as customers. That is, I'm fine if Nike or Adidas or a brand want to refer to me as a customer because they have no reason to care about my soul. But a housing provider, which has a moral responsibility, they've taken stock off a council, and therefore they should be providing healthy housing, and this is a big issue, and I don't think the legislation goes anywhere near far enough.
Yeah, obviously that word customer implies that there's a level of choice, but obviously when you're in a home then there's a responsibility there, so I totally understand. Obviously this is our opportunity through the Fire Committee to sort of make recommendations on the basis of this conversation. So are there any other issues and gaps that you'd like to raise? I mean, maybe I'll go to Pamela and maybe Adam will come back to you if there's anything else. But
yeah, thanks. Firstly, I'd like to say I think it's positive in the fact that it renews people's focus on making sure that people do have personal evacuation plans in place, and that they, you know, that they might require assistance where maybe we haven't put that much focus on that before. I think the challenge is in the implementation of it, and can the London Fire Brigade make sure that they are kind of monitoring to ensure that the information within the new PEEPs is up to date and is current and does support the person, whatever their situation. And I think there's something that we need to think about with regards to the fact that care arrangements change all the time. So people need different things at different points in their life, and they might not want to communicate that so much with their landlords because of the lack of trust and things that don't work for them or haven't worked for them in the past. So I think there needs to be a real emphasis on the landlords making sure that they know their residents and know them really well, and for the fire brigade to make sure that the information that the landlords hold is the most up-to-date and current information that keeps people safe. And I don't know if the legislation now, the regulations go far enough in doing that. So yeah, something to think about.
Yeah, just to follow up and then I'll come back to you, Adam. The issue you've raised about like changes in circumstance, which obviously can either happen from the individual's, resident's point of view, or as you say, if lift goes down. I mean, obviously we are talking very, very early stages for these specific regulations, but from previous experience and now, are you seeing any indication that these regulations will mean that landlords are sort of taking responsibility for changing circumstances?
I think they have to, don't they? But it's how it's enforced, I think, is the answer to that one. So, you know, I think everybody, I like I said, I work for a landlord, a housing association as well, so I understand the importance of all the regulations and, you know, making sure that you're doing the right thing. I don't think anybody ever does, you know, purposely does the wrong thing, but it's making sure that the housing associations have the resources, and also that they are, like I said, building that trust with the people that live in their homes, because that's the area that's the hardest bit to overcome. If, you know, all these things have happened in the past, have things moved on enough for people to have enough trust to talk to people, talk to landlords?
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you very much, Assembly Member Baker. You've asked a question that I can answer in one word, and the answer is no. Yeah, there are huge gaps. So where there are attempts to me, it doesn't make sense, right? Trying to push disabled people into work, at the same time cutting access to work, and then cutting evacuation and housing, not building the right accessible housing. It just doesn't quite make sense to me. So it's just a failure of landlords, looking at people as money-making schemes rather than individuals with, needs, and, we have, real emotions and a heartbeat. I always have an analogy, right? If housing is the heart of someone's society, and we believe in the social model at Inclusion London, if the heart is someone's society and the NHS is vital organs and transport links are vital organs, if the heart fails, everything else does, right? So the house is the most important thing. And there is a failure in this legislation to understand that anyone can become disabled through aging, illness, accident. A lot of people are just enough birthdays away from becoming disabled, and the failure to realise that is, worrying, to be fair, and the failure to act upon it is even more worrying. What are people, landlords, waiting to happen? What are they waiting for? I don't quite understand. And monetary issues are not good enough for me, as a campaigner, and it's not good enough.
No, understood. And I think we asked previously about examples of good examples, basically. But in this particular area, obviously, again, we're talking very early days in terms of the legislation. But can I ask you what you think good would look like in terms of that engagement, and particularly sort of feeling landlords are taking that responsibility and maintaining the sort of level of regular engagement to take into account of changed circumstances? So, what would that actually look like if it happened? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I know that a lot of landlords now are going back to a kind of local neighbourhood model because it helps to know the people living in your homes, right? And residents want to put a name to a face. They don't want to contact a contact centre and be put through to somebody there or somebody here or nobody that you've ever heard of before and you don't actually know what they do or whether they're going to be able to answer your query when you call. So I think that in itself is a really positive thing, to have a named person that you know, that you can talk to, that you trust, that you can rely on to act upon actions when you have them or act upon your queries or, answer your questions for you. I think that will be a positive thing. I think that not enough good news stories are told. We always hear, like I said earlier, a lot of the reasons people don't trust their landlords is because they see such bad stuff in the media and then they have gripes in their own buildings or in their own homes which they can't get resolved easily. So I think there's got to be some kind of celebration of the good stuff that happens, to kind of bring people around and see that actions are listened to, things are changing. You now have somebody that you know and can trust and talk to. And I think if that happens, things would move in the right direction.
Yeah, thanks. Adam.
I recently went to Budapest to watch my team lose in the Champions League final. Let's not talk too much about that. But I'd like to commend, at the time, both lifts in my building were not working. Now, I'd like to commend White Watch Harrow, Blue Watch Northolt, because they came to my building and helped me evacuate, carried me down 6 flights of stairs, so I was able to catch my flight. Now, and that leads to the question, why in 2026 is a disabled person having to be carried downstairs and evacuated by the London Fire Brigade? And for every bad story, there is a good story. So, as I said, I sit on the community forum, and I hear directly from firefighters who are trying to develop a toolkit for housing associations to report if they have a lift outage. So the London Fire Brigade would be aware. Yes, so that makes sense. But without the enforcement of it, it's just a toolkit behind closed doors, right? Yeah. The Fire Brigade really needs to be given more power to push landlords. And until that happens, disabled people's safety is always going to be kind of secondary, or it seems seen as an afterthought, which is really bad.
Thanks. And just say I'm very glad you made it to Budapest, and I hope I'm sure you're happy with the season overall. But if I can just tell you, yes. And I was going to come onto the LFB, just to say if there's been any noticeable change, or whether you want to comment, because obviously we've got the LFB coming in, and whether there's anything specifically in terms of their enforcement or how they're engaging, both in the area of PEEPs, but since the regulations have come in.
Yeah, when I spoke to the group about this, they were saying that they would like to see the LFB measure confidence rather than compliance. And whilst everybody understands that compliance is absolutely essential, it's the confidence element that people are really interested in. So I would like to pose a question back rather than answer a question, I guess, because I think that's really important. And that came through loud and clear to everybody that I spoke to on the group. And I guess it's another thing around communication and talking to people and making people aware and educating.
Thanks, Adam.
Can I offer disability equality training from Inclusion London to all parties here? Because I think there is a massive gap with regard to training, and that is within the LFB itself. If we look at firefighters like Jaden Francois Spirit, who took his own life due to bullying he faced within the London Fire Brigade because he had a learning difficulty, they clearly need an understanding and they need training, not condescending. We're not trying to teach people, we're trying to work with people, to raise everyone's understanding of disability and the fact that being disabled is not like a one-size-fits-all, and evacuation plans need to reflect that. So there are positive steps being made since the legislation, but I would say again, there are still gaps, and I seem to be repeating myself.
No, it's fine. We're here to, this panel is here
Thank you.
to listen to you too. So thanks very much. And that's the end of my question. So back to you, Chair.
I know Assemblymember Curry wants to come in quickly with a brief question.
Thank you. Very quickly, Adam, you worked with me on a motion on highlighting the gaps on PEEPs, and I wanted to thank you on that. And one of the specific issues that you said when you were discussing this issue with me was the requirement of responsible persons to use best endeavours to identify residents in the need of our PEEPs. The wording "best endeavours" is actually the main issue that you've been talking about. The communication issues, the fact that how are you going to communicate with anyone who needs a PEEP in a way that's accessible, and that gap is the main issue, isn't it? That's the problem. And were you disappointed that the government didn't listen to you in the first place before this legislation came through? Is this a missed opportunity from the government that they should have been listening to you? And I'm pleased that the London Assembly passed this motion. We had 4 out of 5 parties supporting the motion, but it's just not enough. The toolkit you've provided is amazing. Is that toolkit being used across the board with councils and the LFB to get across the message that you need for people to understand the gaps and what disabled community need to do?
Thank you very much for the question, Assemblymember Curry. There are huge issues with regard to getting the toolkit out there. So the toolkit is available on the Inclusion London website, but councils are failing to, push it as they should. The wording, best endeavours and reasonable endeavours, that creates a big problem because there is a huge difference in that wording. Who deems what reasonable is? It's the same as affordable housing. Who deems what affordable is? Yeah, because what's affordable to some is not affordable to others. What is reasonable to some is not reasonable to others. So I would like landlords to have MCHLG should have implemented best endeavours in the legislation. They failed to do so. And therefore, it kind of gives landlords a way out.
Yeah.
Yeah? Instead of...
Because I've sent you a letter. That's good enough, isn't it? That's my best endeavour.
Right.
But it's not good
one
enough.
Letter, one correspondence, one email, one...
Yeah.
In an inaccessible format, which, again, is a big problem. So the failure to understand that, disabled people are not one-size-fits-all, and a letter to one may not be understood by another, and therefore the formats need to be changed, can lead to huge issues and huge problems with regard to getting what disabled people deserve, which is equal safety.
Thank you. Thank you for all your support and work that you're working with the London Assembly to make sure that we understand the importance of our PEEPs. Because if anything, we've got to learn what happened in Grenfell can't happen again, and Inclusion London have done amazing work on this. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I was just consulting with the clerk, and I just want to point out, because this committee has heard a lot about the horrific death of Jayden Francois Esprit, and I do think it's important that the coroner's report did come out, and I would just quote Andy Rowe because it's the simplest thing to do at this moment, but Andy at the time said the death of Jayden Matthew Francois Esprit was a shocking tragedy for the LFB. It was important to understand more about Jayden's lived experience at work in the time leading up to his death, and to ensure that his case was fully and properly investigated. The independent external report found no evidence of direct discrimination, bullying, or harassment against Jayden by his colleagues at the LFB, and the coroner did not believe that was the circumstances that led to his death. And I just want to clarify that for the record. But thank you. Can I thank you both so much for being with us today. We're going to take a short adjournment of about 10 minutes as we change panels, and then we will be back in here with our new panel. So thank you, everyone. Welcome back to the Fire Committee. I would like to welcome our second panel of guests who have joined us today for our discussion on fire safety and social housing. Karen Doran, Director of Regulatory Engagement, Regulator of Social Housing. Ruth Davison, Group Chief Executive, Newland Housing Trust. Pamela Oparach, Assistant Commissioner for Prevention and Protection, London Fire Brigade. And Dominic Johnson, Chair of the London Council's Housing Directors Fire Safety Group and Head of Building Safety, London Borough of Southwark. I will kick off with the first question and then hand over to my colleagues for further questions. My first question is to you, Karen. The regulator of social housing has given failing grades to several social housing providers in London owing to fire safety issues. How concerned should social housing residents in London be about these findings, and what do they tell us about the state of fire safety compliance across the sector?
Thank you. You are right that we have begun our inspection programmes. We began that 2 years ago, which covers local authorities, and every inspection looks at health and safety, including building safety. We have inspected 19 of the London boroughs. We're actually engaging with almost all of the 29 because of historic regulatory notices as well. Where we do find failings, and we have done, as you say, serious failings, we issue a C3 or a C4, which is our consumer grading. For C3s, generally we will regulate those through landlord improvement. So we have a designated lead, and we expect an improvement plan from them. We have regular meetings. C4s, which are those where there is very serious failings and significant improvement. We will regulate those landlords through our investigation enforcement team. We ask for voluntary undertakings. The reason we move those most serious cases to investigation enforcement is because that is where we would use powers if we had to. So we have them in the right place for that very intensive engagement. I think it's always concerning to find safety failings, absolutely. But I think actually over the 2 years, having had London boroughs and housing associations in London identify the failings is a step forward. Once they're identified and we're engaging, what we expect is two things really. One is the pace of remediation, the pace of assessments to get those completed, and then the remediation plans. But we also expect there to be mitigations in place for tenants, because remediation is complex at times. We all know that it's taking longer than we would want it to, and therefore we want to see a really good risk-based approach to those mitigations while tenants are still living in those buildings.
You used a term that I think would be concerning to everyone here, but probably everyone living in the sector: voluntary improvements. What could you give me an example of what a voluntary improvement? Because it would seem that anything should be a mandatory improvement. What would that look like?
I think that's terminology, really. So we have under our powers, one of those is to seek a voluntary undertaking. So actually, we ask all landlords for an improvement plan with timescales, and we monitor them against those. For the more serious cases, as I say, they move into investigation enforcement team, and they will use the voluntary undertaking. The reason for using that, and that's just the terminology in legislation for that, is that if a landlord fails to meet their voluntary undertaking, it does open you up to being able to use other powers. So it is a kind of staged approach.
I see. And so when you're talking about these failing grades, to what extent do you think they reflect isolated incidents as opposed to systematic failures of some of these bigger landlords? Because some of these landlords will have multiple buildings. In fact, almost all of them will. If a failing grade is given, do you think that's an institutional issue, or do you think it's a specific failings in a specific building?
Yes, it varies. Sometimes we can see that there actually is good governance in place, there's good scrutiny and oversight of building safety, and we look across all areas of health and safety, about the repairs programme, other services, how you're engaging residents. Sometimes those things are pretty much in place, but actually the scale of what needs to be done is so great that there remains work. However, in other cases, and you'll see that in C3s and C4s particularly, there is very poor governance, poor risk management. Quite often, we always ask landlords to do that diagnostic, so if they don't already know, so that they can find out what is happening here, why actions and assessments have gone uncompleted. So we'll ask them to use external, independent specialist advice for that. And quite often it's because they're not reporting on it, because data systems aren't correct, because they're not liaising with, engaging with other regulators and enforcers like the Building Safety Regulator or the London Fire Brigade or their local authorities of their housing association. So yes, absolutely. We want to find out why things have gone wrong, so that they can not only tackle the presenting issues, but make fundamental change and take on the accountability that landlords should have.
Yeah, so when you're talking about poor governance and poor risk management, I think we saw that earlier today, but I think we've all seen it engaging with many different residents. And what does concern, so if you receive a failing grade and you have poor governance and you have poor risk management, ultimately, the suggestions being put forward is that they would sort of seek external guidance. But what power does the regulator have to see some firm action, and perhaps some of these housing associations, I dare say, exiting the business?
Yeah. We would, in some landlords, we see some quite fundamental change, and that's change in leadership. We also see them bring in additional expertise and specialist offices as well. If we don't see that, that's when we would move to use powers, and we have a range of powers. We can appoint managers in certain circumstances. We can require them to commission particular work. So we have a range of sort of tools at our disposal. And we won't hesitate to use those if we need to. I would say that once the issues are uncovered, whether it's a local authority or a housing association, what we have seen is them kind of make that change. What we need to keep on doing in our engagement with them is really keep the pressure on, so that further action is never off the table, because we need to see that persistence. This is a really complex, complicated area, but that's not a reason for not continuing to make the progress that you need to. So that certainly is part of our role, is to stay with them on that sort of improvement and remediation journey.
I think from our side, what we see is residents not always confident in their social housing provider, plainly failing grades coming forward, and what seems to happen is bills go up for residents and for leaseholders in those buildings, but then also perhaps not all of the safety issues being addressed, and maybe not a hard enough line. Are you confident that landlords in London who are receiving these failing grades are taking sufficient urgent action to address fire safety concerns?
This morning's panel talked a lot about communication, and we're really clear that you can't keep tenants and residents safe unless you've got a good level of engagement, unless there is trust there. Our standards not only cover safety and quality, building safety, but also transparency, influence and accountability. So when we go in to inspect, we're not just looking at whether works have been carried out, what the extent of risks are in buildings. We're also looking at whether they've got resident engagement strategies in place for buildings. When we issue a grade, that they have notified all of their tenants of that grading, when they're developing their improvement plan, that they're engaging residents in that as well. I think there is much further to go, absolutely. We have a fire remediation survey, which we issue each quarter, which will over time go through into the single source of the National Remediation Survey. And we are seeing over time the number of buildings without plans in place for remediation decrease, which is encouraging, but we're not there yet by any means, and landlords aren't there yet either.
Okay. And what assurances can you give Londoners that the regulatory regime is identifying and addressing serious fire safety failings before residents are placed at risk?
Yeah. It's 2 years since we were given our new remit, which extended into consumer regulation and local authorities. I think we have made a lot of progress in that time. We started our inspection programme with a risk sort of basis. We've met with all local authorities and we have a range of data. So we've got our fire risk, fire remediation survey, our other kind of data returns, also referrals, including from Building Safety Regulator, London Fire Brigade and Housing Ombudsman and others. So we're using all of that intelligence really to focus our intervention as much as we can so that we can go into those organisations that have the riskiest homes and where we are seeing signs that things aren't right. I would say that part of our role is to work with other regulators. We all know that no single organisation or regulator is going to solve this. We all have to play our part. We aren't enforcers of building safety legislation in the way that Fire Brigade, Building Safety Regulator, local authorities are, but we do have a really important part to play. And I think that is about driving landlords to get to know their homes, but their tenants better as well. So we require them to collect and report how many tenants they have information on around vulnerability, and just to make sure that they are getting all of that data in, using it to drive what they do on the ground, and also to, I suppose, as we move forward, to make sure that landlords understand their homes and tenants more, because that's how you get to the kind of preemptive, to the preventing these things from happening in the first place. So we need to build that within the landlords as well.
Yeah, I guess before I hand over to Selena Polanski, I guess what I'm not hearing is that urgency coming from the social housing providers. It seems to be that the regulator is almost driving them to get to know their tenants, and Ruth will come to you later. But I do have concerns as somebody who meets with residents regularly, that it feels like we're often dragging those who are providing the housing to just compliance, but that they're lacking that critical curiosity and that drive to do better and that ambition to provide safety for their residents. And that's where my concern is. Where specifically in this sector as well. I mean, as well as in private rented sector as well. But I'll come to Assemblymember
Thanks, Chair.
Polanski.
It very much picks up on that. So, Ruth, if I can come to you, the regulator for social housing has said there's been some serious number of fire safety failings among social housing providers. Why are these failings not being dealt with at the pace that residents expect them to?
So thank you, first of all, for inviting me today. I am the Group Chief Executive of these days, a kind of smallish housing association that operates only in North and East London. So we only have about 8,500 homes. So I'm not representing a wider group. I'm here for New Lawn, but we are a member of a group of 12 associations who work only in London, community associations, and so that I could give a bit more context. I've asked for their kind of views on your questions, and I think that I was invited because you're doing a visit in October as a committee to New Lawn. We do blackout testing, which is incredibly innovative. We basically cut the power supply to a building and simulate a fire to test the way that the kind of life-critical equipment works in a building rather than just relying on individual tests. So I look forward to welcoming you in October. In terms of, I think, some of the things that you've been talking about and what led us to do blackout testing, it's something that's evolved over the last 3 or 4 years. And it was about really understanding our buildings well, not just complying, but having curiosity about it. And actually, just to illustrate, we've rolled it out retrospectively across all of our high-risk buildings, but we now do a blackout test before we take handover of a building. So we're not having an argument with the developer after it's been handed over. We haven't got people living in buildings where equipment may not work as well as it should. And it reveals every time we do it some kind of fundamental failings. So, for example, a building that we were recently about to take handover of, all of the individual bits of equipment had been tested and certified to British standard. When we filled the building full of smoke with London Fire Brigade, colleagues simulated a fire and cut off the electrical supply, we found 40 issues with that building. So, for example, the firefighting lift worked, it went to a secondary supply, but the fob system wasn't on a secondary supply, so they wouldn't have been able to call a lift. So I think why we did it is, Dame Judith Hackett talked not just about compliance, but about being properly assured about the safety of your buildings. And Newlon has quite a big exposure in terms of having built lots of buildings over the last 20 years, lots of them needing remediation. So, what's the learning from that, and how do we go forward? But I think, curiosity rather than compliance is where we are as an organisation.
Thank you, and I appreciate the work your organisation is doing, and I know you can't be held responsible for every failure across every social housing provider, but why is it going so slowly? Because we just heard this morning there's such a gap between where we are and what's needed. And to what the chair just said, it feels like often providers are being dragged to basic compliance rather than then there's a conversation about how do you get even better than just basic compliance, but it feels like even basic compliance is often missing.
So I think dragged to basic compliance is not something that I recognise at all. And I think there is a distinction between the consumer grading system that Karen was just talking about and kind of fire safety and building safety that largely people were talking about this morning. So in terms of that C3 and C4, the majority of landlords who are not compliant in London are local authorities, they're not housing associations. That's not a kind of pokey point, it just happens to be true. Sometimes it's about kind of gas safety certification or whatever, rather than fire and building safety. I think there are lots of reasons why work to remediate buildings has not been as quick as it should have been. Until last year, we were excluded from access to any public funding to remediate buildings where the people who lived in them were social tenants. I mean, that was disgraceful, utterly disgraceful, but thankfully it was changed last year, and £1 billion additionally was added to the Cladding Safety Fund. That has been really transformative in terms of the speed with which we're able to remediate buildings, because before that, what you were having to do as an independent kind of social landlord who needed to balance the books was to go after developers who disgracefully have not come to the table to kind of, pay for the their failings under the contract, go after developers and could not sometimes do the work until, they had agreed to, or you'd taken them through the legal system and held them to account under the contract. So it's really transformative that we've got the Cladding Safety Fund. There are a number of things, I think, that still need to happen. I mean, clearly there are landlords need to step up that work too. But in terms of the Cladding Safety Fund, it's been really well administered and led by Homes England. The engagement is really good. But how it's legislatively framed, there are some things that to me make no sense. So the only things that are funded under it are critical life defects, and those are assessed. This is where it gets a bit technical, but by a FRU under the PAS 9980. All that does is, as I say, talk about, kind of life critical defects. Now, we have taken the view as a landlord that we are not just going to put right homes, make them safe again, to a level that mitigates the risk to life. We want them to be fully compliant. People have lived in homes, blighted by homes that were not built safely to begin with, which is disgraceful. And the impacts on people's lives have been great. We want them at the end to have a fully safe building, a compliant building. There is a gap, there's a funding gap that we're having to fund as a small landlord. For us, that's about £50 million. If we get funds in from developers and from the cladding safety scheme. I think the other thing I would say, and it speaks to what people were saying this morning, we have under that cladding safety scheme an arbitrary assessment of what a risky building is, and it's 11 metres. Now, I think all of the evidence that's coming through is that only about 50% of buildings above 11 metres are really high risk, but there are high-risk buildings below 11 metres. Those are excluded from the cladding safety scheme at the moment, and disgracefully, the protections to leaseholders don't apply below 11 metres. So, we would never seek to pass on the costs of remediating those buildings, but other people might. I think strongly we would suggest that leaseholder protections need to be available to people in buildings below 11 metres. Currently, as well, feedback from my colleagues across the L12 is that the building safety regulator is not turning round applications for refurbishment and making buildings safe as quickly as it should and could. I think, there has been improvement in the performance of the building safety regulator, but most of that performance has been in signing off new building applications. We know that we need to build homes in London, that's really important, but we have examples where it's taken 22 months to get a response from the building regulator for kind of quite simple things in the context of risky buildings, quite simple things to be signed off. And I suppose lastly, there is an issue around staff, but also kind of products. So we have a building which the work has stalled on because the cladding manufacturer went out of business. And it's taken the contractor who is working on making safe that building 8, 9, 10 months to get another cladding contractor to be able to supply the panels, and they've had to forward pay for those. It's a kind of seller's market at the minute, and there's still just a kind of hope that they may arrive in August. So a kind of wide range of things and proper progress with the cladding safety scheme being widened last year, but still I think concerns about the different kind of blockages in the way.
Thank you, Ruth. Dominic, if I can turn to you. Obviously, there was a lot there from staff to remediation to a big funding gap. How much, in your opinion, are these barriers within providers' controls and how much are kind of external factors? And again, the same question really, how do we make sure that providers are keeping up with the pace that residents are rightly expecting?
I'd just like to thank the committee for inviting me. So just to clarify, I'm here in my role as the chair of the London Fire Safety and Building Safety Group from the London Councils. So I think there's a range of factors, but I think maybe just have a different sort of view in this. I think a lot of London councils have done a lot of work to find out issues with their buildings. So I think this is a really complicated issue. This isn't there's one thing, if we sorted that out, a lot of this would be addressed. But I think that the feedback I get from across London is, Ruth mentioned the building safety regulator. So a lot of the buildings where we've got remediation to do. And when I say remediation, I'm not talking necessarily cladding, I'm talking work throughout the building. A lot of London councils are struggling to get approval to go through the Gateway 2 process. So there are delays, and we're talking sort of anything from 6 to 18 months plus. So I think there's lots of schemes that councils have got to a point where they can actually start to do the work, or they feel they can. But obviously with this new regulatory framework, that's creating in itself a challenge, because obviously the BSR is relatively new, they're learning, they've got issues with capacity. So I think it's a hard question to answer, but I think a lot of councils know what they need to do, and the complexities around this is budget, capacity within the market, technical capacity as well, because everyone is generally fighting over the same, whether it be staff, contractors, consultants. So I think there's a range of areas that I think when the Building Safety Act was being considered, there was quite a lengthy conversation around capacity, building control, how we develop capacity within that area, because this was seen as an issue that would be a bottleneck at this point. So I think if there's an area that's creating the biggest sort of bottleneck for councils, it's probably around the Gateway 2 process, around the BSR. So again, this is conversations and discussions we have with BSR who come to our Building and Fire Safety group. So I think it's a mixture, really.
Thank you. And Karen, if I can come to you finally. Residents are really frustrated, and I know you hear that as well. They feel like there's just long delays and there's lots of, whether you call them reasons or excuses. In terms of social housing providers, how much accountability should they be taking, even when some aspects are out of their control? I guess another way of putting it is, what should they be taking responsibility for that is within their control?
I think the accountability always has to sit with the landlord. The relationship is between landlord and tenant. So that's boards of housing associations, councillors in London boroughs, and senior officers as well. And just to pick up some of the other questioning, I probably should say that we see lots of really good examples of this happening. Both sort of going in and actually finding that everything's fine and issuing a kind of C1 or C2, and also after we issue C3 and C4. So I think probably the biggest change that we're seeing is probably more so in councils where it's more difficult. There's a bit of distance between the housing department perhaps and the governance structure. What we're seeing is that really sort of, I suppose, wake up in some cases of that accountability and oversight and monitoring. So what we expect landlords to do, whilst understanding that in some cases they don't have the legal responsibility or right to do the remediation, where they're a third party, where they're not the principal accountable person, or where there are contractor supply chain issues, what we expect them to do is to remain accountable and do all they possibly can. And when we go in and inspect, that can look very different, which I think gives confidence to the kind of pushing those that aren't doing enough. So some landlords will absolutely, they'll have a whole team looking at this, or if it's a smaller landlord, a particular responsibility on one officer, and they will be pushing and pushing until they see the proper sort of safety and compliance authorisations and assurance there. And I think that is, in terms of residents as well, there needs to be that accountable relationship between landlord and tenants. I think, residents we have an open referral mechanism, so tenants can come to us. We will escalate those that we have remit and rollover. We will signpost to others, Building Safety Regulator, Ombudsman. But actually, the relationship that's really important is between landlord and tenant. There needs to be openness, transparency, accountability, and we are seeing a lot of movement in that place, because you can't keep tenants safe unless you do have that relationship. And one example we see is around the no access. So where we see that compliance figures are below where they should be, and there are risks identified, not yet remediated, quite often having not been able to get access to homes is a big issue. And we've seen some landlords make really great strides in that. So building up, spending that time being visible, as Pamela said this morning, building up that trust and confidence and reducing those no access figures.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Pamela, I would ask you some questions, but you're about to be asked, so I'll hand over to my colleagues. Thanks, Chair.
Assemblymember Baker.
Pamela. Hi. Based on your inspection, enforcement and engagement work, how confident are you that London's social housing providers are making sufficient progress in addressing fire safety risks, and where do the most significant concerns still lie? Can you press the... Yeah.
Anyone to forget. Okay. Thank you for the question. I'll start with where we see where our most concerns, and I think that's been spoken about today, and it is still cladding. There's still 1,500 high-rise buildings with unsafe cladding on them across London. There's also, in terms of social housing, you get the normal risks of strangers living in small spaces, basically, with different habits, and it's that relationship with the landlord, the relationship with landlords as well. I think if I just want to clarify our role in terms of social housing.
Sorry to interrupt. Could you just pull your microphone towards you a little bit more? Because if you just pull the whole unit, you can lift it up. There we go.
So what I was going to say is that I just wanted to clarify our role as we are an enforcing authority, and we enforce the non-domestic parts of multi-occupied buildings. So it's the escape routes. Those are the areas that we enforce. And now, obviously, with the new legislation, balconies as well. So our role is limited. We don't go into people's homes. We can't enforce people's habits, and our relationship will be with the responsible person. And the responsible person is the person that is responsible for the safety of the building and the people in the building, and responsible for organising risk assessments that are suitable and sufficient for the building as well. So I think what we see in social housing is very similar to what we see in housing more broadly. It's like I said, it's the cladding, and now, I mean, we all know about the issue with e-bikes and e-scooters. We saw over 200 fires last year. So it's sort of the normal things that we see, but they're not normal to. That when I say the normal things, they're the things that we are more aware of now. So can I get the earlier part of the question again?
Yeah, that's fine. How confident are you that London's social housing providers are making sufficient progress?
But we have good relationships with social housing providers. We work regularly with them, and I think you've heard a lot of the good work that's going on. So as part of, in my department in London Fire Brigade, we have a primary authority partnership team within the organisation. So that team works directly with housing providers, private and social housing, where we ensure that they are consistent across their estate, that they are proportionate in the work that they're doing. So there is confidence. I think there's a lot of good things going on, but some of the issues that were raised by my colleagues on the panel today are the things that we are aware of: funding, access to construction companies, access to people who can do the work for you. Everybody wants the same thing at the moment, even in terms of skills, in terms of fire engineers, inspecting officers, fire safety advisors. We're all fighting for the same people. And in the London Fire Brigade, we are having to pay people a market rate supplement just to keep people working in the London Fire Brigade. London is huge and complex, and for us, I've got a team of not quite 200 inspecting officers, not all of them competent. They're all on a development journey. So we want to focus on the higher risk buildings and higher risk people. We want to focus on people who don't have the same access as, say, able-bodied people, as people that we. Sorry, what I want to say is we focus on the most vulnerable. We'll focus on people with disabilities, on people who have English as a second language, people who are impoverished in London. But we are a limited resource in what we can do. Like I said, less than 200 of us with hundreds of thousands of buildings that fall within the scope of the fire safety order. I'm not sure if I've completely answered your question.
No, that's...
Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah, no, absolutely. And we've got a couple of follow-ups as well. So you've mentioned a few things, but I just wanted to follow up on this just in case there's anything you've missed. Are there any particular fire safety defects or building types that particularly give LFB cause for concern? You've mentioned obviously cladding as a continuant. Is there anything else that can specifically gives you concern?
It is high-rise buildings with the cladding on because they are our highest societal risk. So we inspect we have a risk-based intervention program. So because of the volume of buildings, we have to look at risk, and we assign a relative risk level to all the buildings that are within the scope of the fire safety order. And so if you have a risk level of above 5, we consider those high risk. So that's where we focus on. But that's where we focus on our competent staff are able to inspect those, and that is an even smaller group than the 200 or so that I was talking about. But it will be where there is the highest societal risk: hostels, hospitals, and high-rise buildings, sheltered housing, and care homes are where we will focus.
Yeah, absolutely understood. And you've talked about having good relationships with providers, and that obviously some of the restrictions they have on delivering. But in terms of the sort of post-Grenfell building safety regime, have you seen evidence that providers have improved since that and are responding to those?
I think there's lots of individual stories. Like Tower Hamlets is a really good borough for us. We work regularly with Tower Hamlets, and they are really pushing remediation in their boroughs. But there's also, like, we keep a portal with all the high-rise buildings on it, and so we are one half of the portal, and the responsible person is the other half, so they can report defects on the portal. But we expect them to upload plans, upload building emergency evacuation plans, and upload our PEEPS data. But that, while there is remediation going on, the numbers are not going down quickly enough for us. Yeah. So that, this is 9 years after Grenfell. I don't want to do that, but this is 9 years later, and it's embarrassing that that we are there's still 1,500 high-rise buildings with unsafe cladding on it. It's poor. Yeah. But like I said, we hear about good work going on, but we all think we should be doing more. No, everybody should be doing more.
No. Thank you. These questions are all slightly variations on a theme, but I'm going to ask them. Don't feel the need to repeat anything you've said. But are there providers or parts of the sector where the pace of improvement is not matching the level of risk? And also, just to pick up on your point about uploading data, are you finding that providers are doing that enough? I mean, I assume you don't have much capacity to do a huge amount of chasing. So if that's not proactive, is that sort of just, a gap in your ability to enforce?
I don't think there's a specific set of providers that are doing better or worse than others, because everybody's chasing the same resources. Everybody's trying to get access to funding, and then they're trying to get access to the people who can physically do the remediation work. But in terms of our high-rise building data portal, we have, I've got some data here. We've got 8,640 buildings across 1,957 different providers on the building. And with regards to, if I talk about our PEEPs, so the legislation went live on the 6th of April. So we have over 2,000 BEEPs uploaded onto the portal, and that includes 488 RPEEPs. We will chase, we will write, and as time goes on, we'll be writing more and more people to keep uploading that information onto the portal. So we want to be able to respond properly, operationally, if there's a fire in a building, and the only way we can do that effectively, we still do it effectively, but we will be better if we have that information, if we have the most current information about who's in the building and what the building evacuation plan is like. So that's why we will keep pushing for that information. It helps us to respond. We can, if I give you an example, if we have, if there's a building and there are a number of people with a number of our peeps attached to that building, we will increase our response. So rather than 8 fire engines going there, we'll possibly send 10, send additional aerial, sort of oversized cherry pickers who will act as rescue towers and water towers. But we'll be able to tailor our response to the risk in the building if we have that information.
Thanks. And apologies if I've accidentally trodden on anyone's questions there. Finally, well, not quite finally, but finally for yourself directly, Pamela, what are the most common shortcomings identified through LFB's audits and inspections? Audits and inspections.
The most
common shortcomings, so the biggest failings.
I think it's broad. I think it's a bit of everything. Sometimes it's the way the building is managed, and sometimes it is the physical condition of the building. And it's not just the cladding on the building. What we're more likely to see is issues with compartmentation because of the way the facilities have been fitted, and also as buildings have been remediated, the cladding comes off, and then people see more problems. So I think there's nothing specific. It is broad across buildings. So high-rise
just
buildings
lots of stuff, basically, and lots of stuff in loads of areas, basically.
And we're dealing with things from Georgian mansions that are 6 stories tall that people wouldn't normally consider a high-rise, but they're over 18 metres, so they're high-rise. And these are buildings that are hundreds of years old, which will have a particular set of problems, and then you'll get modern high-rise buildings that have another set of problems, like inline balconies that are not made of materials that we would like balconies to be made of. So I think it's broad. I don't think there's anything specific.
Thanks. That's helpful.
Thank you. Pamela, do you mind speaking really extra loud, because I've got a cold and I can hardly hear you. So apologies for being a bit deaf today. I mean, I've been listening to some of the kind of challenges that you have in enforcement and engagement on this particular issue. And one of the things that your main job for the LFB is to prevent fires.
Yeah.
And through that process is through the enforcement and engagement that you do. I was contacted by some residents in Lewisham, and one of the roads that the road that they live on had 50 HMOs on one street and a number of fires from those properties. And they did an FOI and found that in one property there was the number of visits were 14 in 12 months, and that rose to 23 in the year in one property. So, the LFB do these continual, call-outs and this one particular property. What is the LFB doing to engage with the social housing providers, the council, the residents, to ensure that this continuous call-out, particularly for like one property in one street, how do you prevent that from happening through the work that you're doing? And isn't that just a failure on your part, that you're continually having to go out to these fires all the time? Engagement's not working, enforcement's not working.
Well, we would obviously work with the local authorities when we're dealing with HMOs. The local authorities are the lead authority for those types of buildings. But if you're talking about our firefighters going in, when we engage with those buildings, sometimes it could be for a number of reasons. It wouldn't just be for fires. It would be for home fire safety visits, putting up smoke alarms. And so there would be a number of visits. I haven't heard, and I'm sure because it's my department, I would definitely have heard if there was 23 fires in a particular building in 1 year. So I'm assuming that's different types of engagement, rather than just being fires at a building. I'm not trying to be defensive. Yeah. That's my department, and that's something that would have come.
But something's not right, though, isn't it? When one property continually is having fires and you're being called out and nothing's happening, nothing's working. Residents are not safe, neighbours aren't safe, and you're continually having to do extra work and work harder. There's something wrong there.
No, there is. I cannot deny that absolutely sounds like an issue. But if after this, I would be happy to take like a bit more detail about that particular address so that I can investigate that further. But it does sound like, I just think if it was fires, my team, and I would absolutely know about that. So I think it's more than that. It may be it may be home fire safety visits that we're doing there as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, sometimes presence isn't always that something's not working. Sometimes there is something, this is a process, there's something else going on there. Assemblymember Baker.
Thanks. And this is to everyone, and this is something that you've touched on aspects of the second part of this question, so you don't need to repeat yourself. But the London Local Remediation Action Plan has recently been published. What will it take to deliver on the ambitions with it? Within it, even?
I think we're going in order. Yes, a really good summary of that plan really sets out the scale and the ambition around the government's 2 targets on remediation acceleration. I think just going back to Ruth's point earlier, I think now that the funding access is there, we've certainly seen a big switch in the sort of cost recovery for remediation and social housing. So that barrier, I think, is starting to move a little bit. I think what we need to do is press on the other barriers that we've talked about, the skills, expertise, supply chain, resident engagement, getting to know your residents better. I think the other thing that needs to happen is we kind of need a bit of consistency. So we as regulators, as enforcers, we need to continue the work that we're doing, be as effective as possible, and work together and make sure this framework doesn't have the gaps and the lack of visibility that it's had in the past. So I think we need persistence really in the sort of light of the complexity and scale.
Thank you. Ruth?
Just, if I could make a couple of general points on some of the things that colleagues have covered. So cladding is a really key thing, but internal defects, the missing fire stopping or fire stopping that's been installed wrongly is equally concerning to us as a landlord, and it's something that we fundamentally need to fix. That isn't still funded through the cladding safety scheme, as the name suggests, which is another gap. One of the things that we're really concerned about, and just to go to your point, Zach, about where does the accountability lie? We are the landlord. It's our absolute first priority to ensure that people are safe in homes. So even if they've not yet been remediated or made safe, we need to make sure that all of the kind of mitigations are in place. And we report those very regularly to our board for all of our buildings and in relation to fire risk assessments. Where I'm deeply concerned about is where there are managing agents or we're not the principal accountable person. So, and I think people have not properly understood about why housing associations are not particularly buying Section 106 deals at the moment. I think people have just thought it's all about money and that we're spending money on other things. If for example, I buy a block as part of a Section 106 deal, and I'm not the freeholder, and there's a managing agent in place, I have literally no way in law to compel that managing agent to give me compliance information. Like literally no way. So the only thing that I can do as a landlord, if they're not forthcoming, if they're not a decent freeholder or managing agent, is to make a referral to the statutory bodies, so to the London Fire Brigade, to the Building Safety Regulator. And, Pamela's already talked about kind of the short resources in the London Fire Brigade. We get really good engagement from them, but, those are our residents in some of those old, the buildings that we've bought previously. We've got 78 buildings which have a managing agent. Some of them are really good. Some of them are utterly abysmal. And so, I certainly and the board don't want to buy any more Section 106 unless and until our power to compel the principal accountable person to give us safety information is put in law. And I think just kind of finally, we've had an announcement in the King's Speech about a remediation bill, but we don't know what's in that remediation bill. And, uncertainty is not what we need at this time. I think people kind of inched towards what kind of good looked like and what needed to happen to make buildings safe. in the years after Grenfell. And you know, we've got the Remediation Acceleration Plan for London. There's the National Remediation Acceleration Pledge. And now we've got a remediation bill. And we just need to know what's in it.
Thanks. That's really helpful. Pamela.
So we've, London Fire Brigade has received our funding from to start our own LRAP team for, and we're going to be recruiting to the team shortly, but we are going to be fighting for resources that everybody else is fighting for. And I think for us, we are, we've just talked about the remediation bill. Once the bill goes live, that will help us do better work. We'll have shorter routes to holding responsible persons accountable through fines and other things, rather than going through prosecution cases that can take up to 3 years. And with, yeah, I'm not going to say any more on that, but we really do welcome it. We've been involved in some workshops with MHCLG to kind of frame what the remediation bill looks like, but we don't know what the final bill looks like. So we're all waiting to see what powers we have, when we can use them, and how useful it's going to be to giving us a shorter route to getting some of these organisations and people to remediate their buildings a little bit more quickly. But I feel hopeful. It's we're in a better space than we were 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So,
thank you. Dominic.
I suppose just as a general view again, I think it's a really positive step forward. I'm involved with the private sector enforcement part of this, so the improvement and the additional powers will help unlock some of the challenges that we face. So I think it's, and I'm going to repeat myself, I think the challenge is more around capacity. I think it's a really good step forward, and I think it allows a lot of the obstacles to be removed from an enforcement perspective. But it's when you move into the actual physical construction works, I think that's the challenge, and whether there is sufficient capacity to achieve the deadline. So, sorry, a bit negative, but I just think it's improving how we can engage and get people to do things they need to do. But the thing is always going to be the capacity, the expertise, and the people who are going to do that bit.
No, it's not negative. We need to hear it. So thank you, and we're hearing that loud and clear. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you for that. We keep hearing about resources, and I think this is true of those who remediate unsafe buildings. It's those who are, even people in call centres, even people who are working for housing associations. You don't always have the team you'd like. You don't always have the number. You have people you like on your team, and I'm just wondering. I mean, given the clamour for resources, what the views would be if there was any merit in sort of co-funding London Office of Building Safety officers, and if it was multiple bodies paying into it, it could potentially pay sort of above market rates to bolster that team. Would that be something that would be worth looking into?
I think it's a really good idea. It's an idea that I think was sort of raised right at the beginning of the journey around the Building Safety Act, the impact on building control officers, the impact around fire safety people. So I think it's something that could be developed and have a big impact, and it is something that London councils have lobbied around, because we can see that there isn't capacity in the market. And to be honest, what happens, and I'll put we just pay more than other people when we get those people, but it doesn't backfill those people. We don't really have not necessarily people coming through and learning the trade. So I know it's acutely, within building control, it's a real challenge at the moment in terms of the technical ability related to approvals and building works around that, but it's very similar within fire safety. And whilst there's a big focus on fire risk assessors and the competency, that there is the whole fire engineering bit that sort of drops off of the conversation. So I think it's a really good idea. I just think it's what that looks like and how we get that moving.
Pamela, I'm going to give you a whole lot. Oh, do you want to come in on that one?
Yeah, I was just going to agree with everything you've just said. Last year we attended a meeting that was organised by the GLA with lots of local authorities, and that was it, a central resource for everybody to access. But the funding's been given out differently. Everybody's been given their own funding, so we end up fighting for the same resources. But I think ultimately that is what the sector would like.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Pamela, next up for questions on home safety fire visits. Just looking at the data, the number of visits have reduced since their pre-pandemic peak. How does the LFB assure itself that its current risk-based model is still reaching residents in social housing who are at highest risk from fire?
I think it was COVID forced us to look at our approach with regards to home fire safety visits, and the checker was introduced shortly after we came out of COVID. But it is allowing us to educate more and to target a little bit better. So ultimately, like I keep talking about how we are resourced, we're going to have a business safety checker launching soon. But we want the public to not necessarily to educate themselves. That is probably the best way to do it. We can come in, put smoke alarms up, do a short visit with people, but the whole checker is about your self-assessment, making it much more personal so that you are able to assess what your own risk is like. We will always still come and put up smoke alarms and provide face-to-face advice, but the checker is the way that we can reach hundreds of thousands of Londoners rather than reaching a few thousand every year. And it does allow us to focus more on higher risk people because of the way that the questionnaires are framed. Yeah.
And just coming to Karen and Dominic, how does the LFB work with social housing providers and local authorities to ensure that those most at risk may benefit from home fire safety visits?
Very kind, and thank you. I think probably Ruth and Dominic would have more to say about how that happens on the ground. What we see when we go into landlords and we have returns from them, etc., is that they are using the resource. Certainly, we've seen examples recently in some landlords where they are doing, whether it's joint training for councillors with LFB, or whether it's around just gaining doing community events, gaining that sort of expertise. Not just in relation to the LFB, but certainly in terms of other regulators, we expect landlords to be demonstrating to us that they are engaging appropriately and that they're meeting the requirements of other regulators in this space.
Dominic?
I think the general feedback around home fire safety visits is it's seen as a really positive piece of work, and lots of councils do draw down on it. They see it as a really valuable tool because part of the challenges around engagement is that getting across the threshold. And on a really basic level, if someone from the LFB turns up in a uniform, residents are far more likely to be engaged because that person is a fire safety person. So it's a really valuable tool, and also just from sort of Southwark's perspective, we're drawing on that in terms of, obviously we've got a whole residential PEEPS process, and I think the home fire safety visit complements it in that it's a really valuable tool. So I think generally it's seen in a really positive light in the sector.
Pamela?
In a rolling 12 month, over a rolling 12 months, we do over 24,000 home fire safety visits, and over 9,000 of those are in in social housing or in what they target higher risk people. So our target for higher risk home fire safety visits is 60%, and we exceed that consistently. I've got some data on our, so on average, we visit 511 people a month complete the online triage, and we've increased Q4 last year, we are higher in Q1 this year. So we are going in the right direction in terms of the triage process and then accessing the right people to go out and do visits to. So we are while data's definitely gone down, we are on an upward trajectory again.
Ruth, do you want to comment on that as well?
Not particularly, but I would like to come back on your pool of building safety officers. I think I know that my colleagues would be resistant to that. I think that it's our responsibility to know our homes and to know our residents, and you can't do that with a kind of pool of officers. And you know, the teams which are really strong at Newlon are resistant even to getting temps in when we're short-staffed. And I think you know, you do need good third-line assurance from people outside of your organisation, but I think the first obligation is it's on the sector to kind of grow that resource, but it's for us to know our homes and know our residents. And I suppose in terms of the residential visits, they're important, but they're not a replacement for the work that, you know, you need to do about, you know, evacuation of residents from buildings and understanding who needs to be safely evacuated as a landlord.
Yeah, that's excellent. And just before I hand over to Assemblymember Baker, I just want to point out, over the weekend, I thought really good practice from LFB was they had the Finchley Fire Brigade were out with information on the Charge Safe campaign, but alongside with it, and they particularly targeted an area where a number of delivery motorbikes are hanging out. So they particularly went there with the Charge Safe campaign, and at the same time we're talking about home safety visits, because people with obviously e-bikes, e-scooters, people in those occupations will frequently be charging unsafely in their where they live, and they were specifically going out with not just Charge Safe, but also at the same time invite us in to do a home safety visit. So I thought that was very good work, and I hope that's happening other places in London, but it was certainly happening in Finchley on Saturday. Assemblymember Baker.
Thanks, Chair. Again, I'm asking questions that we're sort of going around the same issues, so please don't feel free to feel you need to say anything you've already said. So I've got a question for Pamela, just following up on Assemblymember Clark's question. So how does the LFB internally monitor and assure itself that the inspection activity is appropriately targeting social housing risk?
Are you talking about our audit and inspection programme?
Yes, so the inspections you're doing, how internally do you know that you're going to the right places?
Yeah, so we have a risk-based intervention programme because of the volume of buildings in London, and that's structured it's sort of three-tiered. So we have a team plan. So all of my inspecting and auditing teams have a specific list of high-risk buildings, and that's the residential high-rise buildings, hospitals, hostels, care homes, sheltered housing. Yeah. So that's part of the programme, and they have to complete that inspection through the year, so that we're modelling ourselves on so that at least 40% of our inspections through the year are on high-risk buildings, and that's. So if I tell you our teams, we have only 37% of my teams can actually inspect those buildings, but we are consistently over 40%. We're around 50% all the time. The second tier is fire safety checks, and that's the work that we do across with our fire stations, because fire stations are a good resource for us, and they will inspect the sort of lower risk buildings, but where you are still likely to get enforcement. So this will be shops with dwellings above. So what we're generally looking at is compartmentation issues between the shop and the dwellings, and it's where 80% of our Article 31 notices come from. So that's an enforcement notice. And then the final layer is a more sort of reactive, agile layer. So we will respond to international issues, we'll respond to fire risks up and down the country. So, for example, we've been doing a lot of work with nightclubs. We had a seminar for nightclubs and bar owners earlier on this year, and we did a lot of work around Christmas time because of the amount of fires. I mean, we would have seen the fires the fire that caused a number of deaths in Switzerland earlier on this year, but we get to respond to those sort of things, to dark kitchens, to Charge Safe as part of that. Yeah. So we have a three-layered approach that allows our staff that are not fully competent to inspect high-risk buildings to be fully involved in our inspection programme. Yeah. But like I said, our focus is on those team plans and the high-risk buildings.
That's fantastic, thank you. And just following up on this, in terms of social housing risk specifically, obviously a lot of those things that require you to, that enable you to categorise the risk. Some of it is presumably obvious. Presumably you can work out whether something is clad and how tall it is and everything like that. But some other of those factors will be dependent on information. So do you find that sometimes you, through a lack of information, or LFB, have misallocated the risk? So how do you assure yourself that you are spending your resources in the right place? Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, we use data. We use, I cannot remember the name of the dashboard, but it shows us heat maps where we would have done lots of home fire safety visits, where there would have been lots of fires, where we would have had interactions on different levels with particular areas and particular communities. So we will focus on those areas, especially when we're working with our fire station colleagues, because they are a really good resource for us. We're also training our junior officers, so they are all getting level 2 fire safety courses, so that knowledge about fire safeties and recognising what risk looks like and where they should contact us if the risk is sort of beyond their knowledge to deal with.
So it's
our junior officers are very good and getting way better at being able to identify risk. The information that comes back into my teams is sophisticated information now. I think what we're doing in terms of training them is really working for us.
So it's basically you've got the data, but you're supplementing it with actual real life information that comes in
and
every
local
day.
knowledge from our fire stations.
Okay. Thanks. That's really helpful. So to Ruth and Dominic, what's your experience of working with the LFB when deficiencies are identified? And are there any areas which you think the process could be more efficient or more helpful?
Sorry, I'm probably going to cough you to death now, sorry. My experience, I think, probably just setting the scene, we've got a very good working relationship with the LFB, so we meet with the Borough Commander, Dan Capon, every 6 weeks. So we've also done joint high-rise exercises, we do familiarisation visits. So in terms of the audit and inspection process, generally what happens is we'll get contacted, we'll meet with the inspecting officer on site, with the most recent FRA, we'll walk the block, they'll raise questions about particular issues. Sorry. So in terms of if an issue is identified, generally we will always try to make sure that any action is in train to give confidence, because I think a lot of this is around the collaboration, the confidence that if we're saying that something is going to happen, it does happen. If it gets to a point where there are actions that, I haven't experienced an enforcement notice since I've been at Southwark, but if it became a notice of deficiency, then obviously we'd get a set period of time to respond in terms of these are the things that need to be done. We would then action that and then respond saying that will be done by this point to build that confidence. So it's very much, I'm going to say a collaborative approach, but it's that trust. So we've got a very strong relationship because it is about we want the same outcome, we want our residents to be safe, and that is based on the fact that there is an issue that needs to be identified. So generally I think it's quite a positive sort of relationship. I'm just going to cough to death now.
So when I was preparing to come today and talking to the teams internally, our Assistant Director of Building Safety said that he thought the work with the London Fire Brigade was partnership working at its best, which is high praise. Obviously, we do the blackout testing, not always, but often with the London Fire Brigade, who use our blackout tests as training days. So there's good local relationships there. We've had 5 audits in about the past year. I think what he said was that you would know if you'd failed an audit, but it would be good to people tell you that you'd passed, and why, what was the good practice that they saw. I think they appreciated the fact that the London Fire Brigade, if they've been called out to an incident, will pick up the phone if there are issues that they've identified in the building, so we can address them in a timely manner. But when I was kind of trying to establish kind of how often we would talk to colleagues, he said maybe like 5 or 6 times a week across our patch, which is, that's pretty involved engagement, but a good experience in terms of the audit, and we haven't had any enforcement notices in recent years. When I talked to colleagues in the L12, they also had a pretty good experience in terms of engagement from the fire brigade in terms of the audit process.
Thanks. That's really helpful. And a final question from me on this section. Pamela and Karen, how do the LFB and the regulator share information when either body identifies fire safety failings in a social housing provider's stock?
So we would share information on specific cases. As I said before, we have an open referral mechanism. So we'll often get referrals straight from London Fire Brigade. And we also require landlords to let us know when they have enforcement notices as well, so that we can follow up that.
I would reflect that. We also use I talked about the high-rise building data portal. That's one of the places where we get very up-to-date information and then we can respond to quite quickly. So the information will come in perhaps about a defect if the fire lifts are not working or if the smoke extraction systems are not working, and then that will go to our fire stations and to our control operators. So fire stations will know, they'll go back and make a visit to the building, and then if we need to look at our response and who's responding to that building, we'll work with our control operators to increase the response to a particular building. And that's a lot of the buildings on our high-rise building data portal are social housing buildings, because a lot of the providers are. We've got all the local authorities on it and other housing providers. So that's just one of the ways that we'll work with, where we work well with partners.
Thanks. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Next section is on RPEEPs, and coming to Assemblymember Turrell.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So these questions are to the whole panel, so we'll start with Karen and just work down the table. So that given that some Grenfell campaigners originally called for stronger duty to provide individual evacuation plans, do these new personal emergency evacuation plans regulations go far enough?
Thank you. I was sort of reflecting on the panel this morning and some of the examples given about where these might create some gaps. And also Pamela this morning when she said that that this was a useful, positive reminder of this requirement and this need really for vulnerable people living in high-risk buildings, but actually it's always been there. It's always been an obligation and something that landlords are accountable for. I absolutely recognise that the new legislation gives enforcers more remit to follow up. But from our point of view, there shouldn't be any social housing landlords that don't already know that they need to have information about who's living in high-risk buildings, keep that up to date, and have a plan for whether it's evacuation or whatever whether simultaneous kind of evacuation or whatever plans are in place. When we drafted our consumer standards, which went live on the 1st of April 2024, we particularly drafted them in a way that gave a lot more prominence to having tenant data, to keeping that up to date, to using it and being able to give evidence. So when we inspect, we say, that's great if you've got this level of data on vulnerabilities, on language barriers, whatever that is. How are you using that to triage and to put in place plans to prioritise work, etc. So it is really positive to have this kind of reinforced, but we would expect to see that already happening. I think, the legislation itself and the guidance around it makes really clear that they can only be effective if you've engaged with the resident themselves. And I think that is a challenge. But hopefully some of the things that were raised this morning around perhaps a disabled child having different caring arrangements, if you have that proper resident engagement, then you will understand what the household needs, whether that's 7 days a week or 4 days a week, etc. Thank you.
I think, even before the legislation came in, for all of our high-risk buildings, we had emergency response packs that are in the girder boxes on site, and all of those have been duplicated and uploaded to the London Fire Brigade portal. I think, and where we start from is, as an organisation, we look at what information we have on a system, but in relation to our high-risk buildings, we then try and contact all residents, and then visit if we can't contact them via telephone, just so that we're clear about what, do we need to work with the fire brigade on a home fire safety visit? What do we need to make sure that people can safely evacuate? We're not perfect. There is more that we need to do. What I would say is that data changes all the time. People's needs change all of the time. And actually, you can't just rely on whether somebody had a disability when they moved into your home. So somebody might break their leg or be undergoing cancer treatment, and it might be much more difficult for them to evacuate. One of the things that we do when we answer the telephone, just on kind of day-to-day engagement, is ask people if anything's changed for them or people in their household that we need to know about, in order that we, nuance any kind of service delivery, but also help them to evacuate from their home. It's not perfect, but just to give you a kind of sense of the work that we're doing, we have 220 members of staff in the Housing Association, and one of them is full-time working on making sure that we've got evacuation plans for our residents.
I think for us, we really welcome the RPEEPs regulation, but we've also written to government to say that this can't be the end game, that this needs to transition to buildings regardless of height, and the focus should be on the people. That this should be we just think there are more people that that are not benefiting from this, and that it should be much more widespread. And the way it works for us is we will respond best to emergencies if we have all the information that we need. And the way to do that is this updated information in the secure information boxes. That's what we rely on. We have tablets that we keep on the back of our appliances where we have that information. So our crews are very reliant on this to make sure that we're responding quickly. But like I said, it's good regulations, but we feel it's limited, and we have spoken to government about this.
Hi. I think this is a really hard question, because I think it's a really good first step. But again, when you're looking at, we're now in the detail of this, so we're the whole engagement piece. We're getting a lot of interest around residents asking for PCFIRAs, etc. So again, just to give it context, we've got 10,099 homes that fit in this category. So that engagement piece, just on that volume, if you were to increase it, and I'm not saying stepping it down, because there is the complexities around height that is arbitrary. That capacity volume probably will go out somewhere around 25,000, 30,000. So I think this is a really good first step, but I think it's probably, my view of this is, let's get to the next 12 months to see what the outcomes are, to measure the success of it, and see what improvements can be made, and actually get some real data in terms of outcomes and how we've influenced and changed people's perception, engagement, and their understanding of this process. So I think it's a good first step, and I think it's a really complex issue that isn't easily sort of overcome.
Thank you for those. So the regulations currently only apply to buildings over 11 metres. Do you think height is a useful metric for fire safety assessment? And do you think there's any other metrics that could be used in its place? If we start again with Karen and move down.
I'm regretting sitting where I did. No, absolutely not. What you would expect is that a landlord looks across its homes and looks for any risks. A risk is certainly height. of building, but we've also known that other buildings which have mentioned, care homes, shelter schemes, you know, by their very nature and the residents who generally live there also pose a risk in terms of building safety.
I think, you know, my answer, height is, and particularly a kind of arbitrary 11 metres makes no sense to me.
I think I'm just going to be repeating what Karen said, in that I think there's other factors you need to look at. You do need to look at the people in the building. You need to look at the areas. You need to look at the risk around the building. There's lots of things you can look at. And for us, it is not just height. Our focus is people first. That's what the fire safety order is about. It's about people rather than, it is about buildings and keeping buildings safe. But the whole reason for it, if a building is empty, you know, the fire safety order doesn't necessarily apply. It is about people.
I think it's similar to my colleagues. I think it's a hard one because, again, from a fire safety perspective, there's other things you look at, not height in isolation. So it's just difficult. I don't think height is an arbitrary thing, and why 11 metres? Why not something else? So it's just a very difficult place, I think.
Thanks. I'll be nice to Karen. I'll go the other way up the table this time. So, what is your assessment of whether the regulations are driving the wider culture change around listening to residents and understanding individual needs that was called for after Grenfell? If we start with Dominic.
Again, I'm going to perhaps talk specifically around Southwark. So where we've got new burdens funding, we're in a different place in terms of we've got a dedicated team that's driving this. And that's allowed us to really focus and set out a programme around engagement, around actually how we're going to reach residents in a different way. Moving away from sending a letter to, eventually the plan is to be like the face-to-face engagement, door knocking. So it's allowed us to set out a very focused delivery plan. So that's the difference, I think, for a lot of councils, in that the new burdens funding has allowed us to actually set up, well, again, I'm talking to Southwark, but set out a dedicated project that will be measured through that process to say, where are you, what have you delivered, what are the changes, what are the outcomes. So I think it's been a positive sort of step for us.
I think we look at it slightly differently. So fire safety is not just about the regulators, it's a whole raft of things. It's a combination of fire risk assessments, furniture and furnishing, regulations, licensing, improvements to fire safety systems. All of those things have to work together to support communities. It can't just be about single regulators.
So could you repeat your question? Was it about communication and culture change?
Yeah, absolutely. So the question was, which is, what is your assessment of whether the regulations are driving the wider culture change around listening to residents and understanding individual needs that was called for after Grenfell?
So I would hope that people do things not just because they're regulatory requirements, but they're the right thing to do. I think that regulation is driving some good behaviours. I think you heard this morning, though, that people do not feel that communication is kind of always two-way, that people are being listened to, that the work is as good as it should be. I mean, you know, certainly, I'm kind of presenting as an example of good practice this morning, but I know that if you asked residents in some of our buildings, they'd be furious that they didn't know X or Y or Z. And I think, you know, you can't underestimate how hard the job of communicating and listening well is, and always seek to do more. But we should not be changing behaviours because of regulation and legislation. And actually, truthfully, I fear that some of the people who built the buildings have learnt the lessons not at all. And, you know, we spend, as a smallish association, £3 million a year on legal fees holding people to account for shoddily built buildings, and that's just completely unacceptable to me. You know, there's a handful of them who have come and said, this building should not have been built like this. You paid for it once, it was signed off as safe, we'll do the work. But they are a very, very vanishingly small minority, and the rest of them are kicking and screaming to remediation.
Thank you. I think, I mean, we always say we don't regulate culture, but actually once you've been in and looked at a landlord at an organisation, you really do very quickly work out what the culture is like. And I'll go back to what I said earlier around the consumer standards. When we brought those in, we very purposely, we could have built in the sort of transparency, influence, accountability into, you know, woven it through, but we put that in a very separate standard to give it prominence. But when we go in, what I say to the teams is, when you're looking for evidence of whether this landlord treats its tenants with fairness and respect, you'll find that evidence not in just watching a small group and how they behave with each other. You'll find that evidence in whether or not they are communicating well through a repairs service, whether they have delivered their damp and mould remediation works on time, whether they have a true sort of scrutiny group that gets to choose its own agenda and what it wants to scrutinise and gets information. I think if you walk in and see a group of tenants meeting to scrutinise and they're given the papers on the night, I think you pretty soon get the idea that that is not effective tenant scrutiny in place. So I think it's the thing that comes out of all of the other stuff that you look at. There are variations, you know, Ruth has said it herself, really, there are definitely variations, but the thing that we also look at, we did some analysis comparing sort of those organisations that had done relatively well from inspection and those that hadn't, and things around kind of culture of continuous improvement, being really honest, being transparent, all of those things came through as the difference between the two.
Assemblymember Bakari.
Thank you. This is to Ruth and Dominic. Have you found working with the LFB in helping you meet your responsibilities around regulations and improving outcomes for disabled residents? And what more could the LFB do to support social housing providers in implementing the new approach? Do you want to go first, Dominic?
I think I referenced it earlier, so I think we've got a very strong relationship with the LFB in terms of sort of the collaboration, working very closely together, meeting regularly. I suppose just going back a step, I mean, most social landlords are aware that they're the responsible person. So we're very clear where the line is in terms of what we need to drive and have a plan and really provide assurance to the LFB that there may be an issue, we've got it in hand, there's a plan to address it. In terms of the LFB's sort of role, really, it is that enforcement, oversight, and holding us to account. And I think it works quite well. But I just want to be really clear in that, as the landlord, we're acutely aware that we are the responsible person and we need to know what the issue is and have a plan to address it. In terms of the relationship with the LFB, we will work with them to say there is an issue that we need to make you aware of, which we do quite regularly in terms of meeting with operational crews if there is an issue with one of our buildings, updating the high-rise portal so that as we know more information, we share that. But we do obviously have to provide that confidence that we've got a plan to address the issues. And obviously, if that relationship or trust breaks down, I think it's quite right the LFB would seek to take further enforcement action against us. So it's just getting that balance right. I think generally we get very good support and we do have access in terms of if we need to talk to the engineering team about a specific issue, we can draw down on that. So I think at the moment the model works fine from a social housing perspective. But it's been very clear what our different roles and responsibilities are. So hopefully I've answered the question.
Great.
don't really have much to add to my answer earlier. I think we have really good support and engagement from them, both the kind of technical teams and the local crews. And that was mirrored by when I talked to other community associations in London, they felt the same.
And what more? Actually, no, this is for Karen and Pamela. How effectively landlords are identifying the eligible residents for PPE plans under the new regulations? Is this working well in actually finding the right residents that we need to be targeting? Because we've heard from Inclusion London that they are not satisfied with the new regulations that are coming. There are lots of gaps, and the onus being on the residents themselves, and they've had to provide a toolkit themselves to kind of reach out to disabled residents. What evidence have you seen of landlords effectively working to make sure that they are reaching out to these particular residents?
I think it remains quite a challenge to identify and engage with residents and those with disabilities. What we see the differences we see is in some organisations they might say, actually we've tried but we can't get to a good level of data on the tenants living in these particular buildings. We'll continue, but it's very difficult, compared to other landlords that will say we haven't got the right level of data and this is our plan to increase it. So, and there'll be a mix of things, whether it is sort of home visits with London Fire Brigade, or whether it's sort of community events or dedicated teams, etc. Just changing different ways of trying to get in touch with people. That's what we expect to see. So, in a way, it's, we'll see how the new regulations perhaps push that on and get the pace on a wee bit, but it's something that we've already been looking at when we inspect, and appears in some of our judgments if we feel that landlords aren't making enough effort to get the data and understanding and then act on it.
Pamela, I mean, are you finding it a challenge as well? And have you tried to work with Inclusion London with their toolkit to make sure that that message is getting out?
We haven't done that yet, but we'd be absolutely more than happy to. And I would agree that we've not got enough information come through. So, like I read earlier on, that we've got 2,048 beeps updates to the portal, but only 488 are peeps. We know that doesn't reflect the number of our peeps that are needed across these buildings. But we will work with any organisations to get things moving, and if it means we want to engage rather than enforce our way out of problems, especially with social housing providers, because they don't have the funding that these privately owned tower blocks have in the middle of Westminster. So we want to be proportionate in what we do, and it's engage as far as social housing is concerned.
Karen, I talked earlier to Adam about the wording of reasonable endeavours and really they needing to be best endeavours, and every effort being made to communicate using an accessible way for all residents. Have you got any evidence that this is actually happening, or do we need to see? Do we need more time to work out whether this is something that is achievable? Have you found anything at all yourself?
I think in terms of the regulations that, as we said this morning, it's early days. We were picking that up and we were picking up pre-April because there needed to be work happening anyway in preparation, and just because it is something that social landlords need to do. We've picked it up in some inspections post-April, and we've looked at the level of RPEEPs that people are getting to put in place. I think in one situation we said what was being done wasn't adequate enough. The plans to build up the level wasn't good enough, and that was part of the sort of grading decision. We're just going to have to see how this goes, but there does need to be a pace to it, clearly, where you've got high-risk buildings.
So once there is more evidence in terms of this process, particularly in terms of communication, and it's found that it isn't working, the message isn't getting out, people aren't getting the support that they need. Do you think that there are any kind of signals from the government that they will revisit these regulations and make them fit for purpose? Do you think that's something that could happen?
I don't know. That wouldn't really be for us to say. Our focus will be on trying to sort of work with social housing landlords to make sure they're implemented, and every effort is made.
Okay, thank you.
Finished now with full questions. Okay, Assembly Member Polanski.
Thank you, Karen. Can I just pick up on that? Because this difference between reasonable endeavours and best endeavours, I realise your role only goes to a certain place, but if it is proven that it's not working, and sadly if there's even one tragic case or a case of it not working, would you be willing to call for the change?
So we're an independent regulator. We don't lobby government. That's just not part of our role. The role that we do play is to provide data and insight from what we see, and we work really closely with colleagues at MHCLG to make sure that they are informed by the evidence and the data that we see. So, yeah, clearly, as has happened in the past, where we're picking up things and we're making that sort of visible through our regulatory judgments, and there's an issue there, we do talk with MHCLG and colleagues. So we would do what we can within our role, really, but no overstep that.
Thank you. Dominic, I suspect this might be a similar dynamic, but earlier on you said that to reduce the kind of amount of people who have PEEPs under 11 metres would be a complex situation. I'm presuming you mean complexity in terms of resourcing and finances, but I just wanted to clarify if that's what you mean by complex.
Yeah, I just think it's capacity in terms of, again, to put it into context, it would increase the volume of how, I mean, that's not an excuse, but it's, I think if that was the aspiration, it would really need to be like a stepped approach so that we see how how successful this is in terms of outputs and the approach. And then if it was to expand, I think that step approach would be more proportionate in terms of we would be overwhelmed, if I'm honest. But having said that, just to be clear, we do them for buildings below 11 metres. It's just more around that will be particular to tenants rather than leaseholders, whereas above that we offer it to leaseholders and we make recommendations.
It feels capacity can only be a reason up until a point when we're talking about people's lives, but I accept, there's a limit to your role in terms of how much you can lobby for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think just again, just to put this into context, these are things that do happen currently. It's whether if we set out below 11 metres, it's just being clear that the impact that has. That's all. I mean, I completely agree with the principle. I'm not saying it shouldn't happen. It's more that I think it needs to just be a stepped approach so that we don't get overwhelmed.
Thank you. Pamela, since the April 26, what has been your experience of residents disclosing disabilities or needing additional needs, and how's this working under the new regulations?
So we held a workshop just prior to April for local authorities, and we have a community engagement forum as well, and so we communicate regularly with people on. I think Adam's on our forum, and I met with them last week, but not specifically about this. But we've updated all our policies, our guidance on our external website. We've got information for landlords and residents. But I think our role in this, I heard clearly what Adam and Pamela said in the earlier panel about engagement. I think we engage well, but if they're saying we need to engage more, we absolutely have to. We can't just go, no, this is all that we're capable of doing, all that we're going to do. Because if the community is telling us we need to do more, then we must do more. But our role in this is a bit more of a, like I explained earlier, this information is so that our fire crews can respond quickly and respond more efficiently, and we have the right resources at these buildings. So I absolutely understand what you're saying, and I do think the process probably needs to be maybe a bit there has to be simpler ways of sharing the information so that people can just fill out a form and then it's done. But at the moment, it's quite complex, and I think it's also about trust. Residents have to trust their landlords to hand over that quite personal information about themselves, and if that's not established, then it's gonna be difficult. But if there's a way that residents can get the information directly onto our portal or directly into the secure information boxes, then I think that there's got to be better ways of doing it than sharing that information in a sort of quite a triangulated way.
That makes sense. I think people, if you look at polling, would obviously trust the fire brigade more than maybe they'd trust their landlord, with no disrespect to their landlord. Does LFB have the capacity and systems in place to be able to deal with this information?
Sort of. I say sort of. So the information's going on the portal now, and at the moment, like I said, we have 488 RPeeps on there. But the information is for our fire stations. We store it, we hold it, but it's also this. Where us having it is secondary to it being in the secure information boxes, because that is where it's most valuable to fire crews. So we have a team that manages the portal, and so we are, as the information comes in, we are managing it. But that team's it's growing kind of every year, and we have to be able to afford that team. The team's grant funded at the moment, and we know that grant funding is not a permanent source of income, so we have to find a way of making sure that we can manage it when the funding eventually stops.
Makes sense. And just thank you for your commitment as well, and using Inclusion London's toolkit or working with them. That's great to hear. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Just one final question, which David has helpfully pointed out, but given that uploading information onto these forms is quite complicated, is there a reason that tenants, is there not a reason that it can't be made easier to upload the information?
I'm not a tech head or anything, but I think I do think there's always simpler ways of doing things. But I think this is new. It's new. These are new regulations, and hopefully they'll evolve and develop so that it does become simpler and people can do it in the privacy of their homes and upload the information in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, is it because the requirement is placed on the landlord or the registered provider? So I mean, maybe that adds a level of complication. I'm not sure, but it does feel like when trust is an issue, ultimately, your very good point is that at the end of the day, the reason that this information is so useful to the London Fire Brigade is because if there's a fire, they know exactly, where the vulnerabilities lie, and that's what we need to get to. If trust is a barrier with the landlord or the RP, that's a critical issue.
I agree.
And if there's a way, I don't know. I mean, maybe we don't know the answer in this room, but it's.
And I certainly can't say that I know the answer, but they are the person who's responsible for the building and the people in the building. They're the ones who are collecting the rent, and they need to develop those relationships. They need to make sure their buildings are well managed and well maintained. And if they are, you can build trust in many, many different ways, communicating properly and more regularly, making sure that the buildings are fit for purpose and that they are safe, and you will have those relationships with people.
Yeah. Dominic.
Could I also just add to that as well? So at a recent presentation at RPeeps, one of the challenges with the bill is you can go through the whole process. You can do the PCFRA, do the additional recommendations, but if that individual declines to share that information with the LFB, we can't share that information. Yeah. So there are some sort of practical sort of nuances that we need to appreciate. That it is like the engagement is a challenge, but even once you get past the threshold and do the PCFRA, there is still a process. I do struggle with we need to put a box on the outside of the building and put a bit of paper in, but like that's because obviously the operational crews get the best benefit of that, but that makes it a challenge for lots of councils in terms of volume, like the information changing, how you do that signal. I mean, obviously you should review it on an annual basis, but there's some sort of practical operational things I think that could be improved, but there are pitfalls that are set out in the bill that don't allow some of this to work more fluidly. So.
Yeah. understand. Can I just thank you all for being here today, and for the first panel as well. It's been really good to have your views and to be able to scrutinise you this afternoon and to hear from people with lived experience in the morning. It's always a good balance to have that side by side, but also I think the information we get is much the richer for it. We just have a few short items of business. You're welcome to stay for that, or you're welcome to leave if you're itching to get out of here. We don't take offence either way. Can we note the report for today's discussion? Can we also delegate authority to me as chair in consultation with party group lead members to agree any output from the discussion? Can the committee note its work program, its meeting dates as agreed by the London Assembly at its annual meeting on the 11th of May 2026, and the additional activity undertaken since the last meeting, namely the informal briefing of the London Fire Brigade on arson attacks? The next meeting of the committee is scheduled for the 15th of September at 10 a.m. in the chamber at City Hall. I have no other urgent business, and I now declare this meeting to be closed. Thank you.